actually sit with you for how long have we been speaking?
A couple of years now.
I know, it's been crazy. So it's really also a good opportunity for me to talk about with you your path into stage management and what you love about it, and then also some details about how you do that. So tell me first, why stage management?
Why stage management? Stage management for me didn't necessarily start out as a conscious choice. When I went to college, I thought I would be an actor because that's all I knew. And I was so eager to be in the theater, I just wanted to do anything. So my very first theater class was Intro to Theater, and the professor asked if anybody was interested in working on a show that he was doing. He'd show up at 4 o'clock at the theater. So I showed up at 2. And we walked in, who wants to run the light board? I don't even know what this is. So I learned how to run a light board. The lighting designer said, hey, I'm doing another show. You want to come and repatch in our little studio theater between acts of Uncle Vanya? I said, oh, okay, sure. So I did that, and I just sat around. The act was over, unplugged 1, plugged this into 1, unplugged 12, plugged that into 12. And then I did a show in that space in which our lighting designer had to bail out. I was like, oh, well, I know how the lights work in here. I'll do it. No idea what I was doing. But I hung lights, I pointed them at the actors, and ran the light board and was in the show. And that kind of led me onto a path of knowing something about technical theater. So I start getting more opportunities. Oh, Matt, he knows some tech stuff.
How old were you?
18, 19. Mm-hmm. And so I started doing that, and at UC San Diego, the theater department has a relationship with the La Jolla Playhouse, which is a major regional theater in the area. So I started working as an electrician there. So I started running a follow spot in the original Tommy before it went to Broadway. I was a light board operator for Culture Clash. So started doing that. Meanwhile, I'm acting in the shows, and I'm taking my dance classes and doing all that stuff as a student. So these two weird parallel tracks are kind of developing. Then I took my first stage management class. I say first, only stage management class. And then one of the grad student directors said, hey, I need someone to stage manage my show. Okay, now I'm stage managing my very first show, and I walk in with my big kit with all my stuff in it. And that apparently went well enough that director recommended me to a local producer of the Young Playwrights Project in San Diego, hired me to stage manage my first show. I got paid $100, not a week, just the whole thing. $100 for the whole gig. And that apparently went well enough that they invited me back the next year, and the next year, and then I was the supervisor of the stage managers and started taking on more responsibility. So then jumped back to the La Jolla Playhouse. I started developing this technical theater side as a lighting designer. Like, hey Matt, do you want to be the assistant lighting designer for a show? It pays $300 a week for 3 weeks. Or do you want to be the PA on the show? It pays $300 a week for 3 months. I said, oh, I'll be the PA. Sounds great. So that weird little, I guess, practical choice kind of led me down. I kept taking those opportunities and walking through those doors. And I enjoyed it. Mm. I really loved being in rehearsal. I really loved helping out, being proactive, finding solutions, taking care of everyone. And it just appealed to the certain aspects of my personality. And I did a good job. At the risk of oversharing, one of the things about me is I grew up in a family with a really horrible divorce. And my parents were crazy. It was very difficult. So I became the peacemaker, the problem solver, to people with really strong personalities with equal and opposing needs. And I'm left to try to help figure it out. So the skill set of managing through that as a young person exactly layered onto stage management. It's like, all right, there are people with big personalities who have needs, and I have to figure out how to take care of them and make it work.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, great, not a problem. Organize stuff, make it good, take care of it, awesome.
Yeah.
So all during school, I'm performing in shows, I'm doing technical theater, and then I'm developing this professional career as a PA at this major regional theater. I'm doing Midsummer Night's Dream with Loretta Devine and Malcolm Jamal Warner. I'm a production assistant on How to Succeed in Business pre-Broadway with Matthew Broderick, directed by Des McAnuff. So I'm doing a lot of these really great shows. Then after a few years, the La Jolla says, hey Matt, do you want your equity card? I was like, oh, sure, that'd be great. And that was really the moment. It's like, okay, I'm a stage manager now. Like, this is now what I do. And I love working with people. I love working, like, the people are what continues to drive me. It doesn't matter if it's like a quote unquote great show or not a great show, or a musical or a play or a dance company or a corporate. It's like when you're working with good people, That's just fun.
Yeah.
That's what I enjoy.
So you didn't really have any formal, what we call in Australia, say, tertiary education or university education in stage management,
No,
right?
it was one class at an undergraduate university.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So you are now the third person that has a successful career without actually doing a degree, which is, I'm fascinated by that trajectory. And do you think that that's still a path that is applicable for people today, or do you think people now look at stage managers and want to see a degree on that CV resume?
I don't think any of us want to see a degree or need to see it. If you see it, you have certain expectations, and there are certainly a lot of programs these days, but I teach in a BFA program. Mm-hmm. So with young people, 18, 19-year-olds who are very focused and want to be stage managers. My personal opinion is that however you get your education, if you're at a BA program, if you just went to high school, it's not the degree that stamps you. It's really your skills. Mm-hmm. And those skills can be developed through any process. I can teach someone how I want a prop list made. I can show you how I want a scene breakdown done. Mm-hmm. But I can't teach someone how to handle Patti LuPone screaming at you in the wings while you're trying to check props. I can't teach someone how to deal with an injured actor who's, screaming backstage and meanwhile the show's still going on. Mm-hmm. I can't teach someone how to know when to say stop when two pieces of scenery are about to crash into each other. Those are those skills that you can develop over time or are just part of your personality. And yes. When I teach, I try to make my students very aware of that. Those what some call hard skills and soft skills, what I refer to as subjective and objective skills. Because the hard skills you can get anywhere. You can get them at a school, you can take a class, you can get them online, we can sit down in an hour, you'll know something. Mm-hmm. But those soft skills, you have to really work, if they're not part of your personality, you really have to work hard at cultivating them because they are just part of who you are. And you can grow and adjust and change, but it takes a lot of practice and a lot of effort and awareness and emotional intelligence to be able to go, oh, this is that conversation I'm having now about that thing we talked about of just acknowledging the other person and letting them get their stuff and their anger out, but I don't have to take it on. Okay, this is that moment where I just stay calm and breathe and acknowledge them, as opposed to being reactive or being defensive or explaining,
So the beginning of that stemmed from your home environment, which is the foundation to start that, and then obviously you went into work where you're very quickly given responsibilities, even if you weren't being paid much for it. Yeah. How would you recommend somebody go out to cultivate that? They're at a school and they're learning stage management, they're learning the practical element, they've got a super chilled environment at home, they're not in any, thankfully, difficult situations, they're not confronted with them daily. Is there something that they can go out and do or experience or participate in that would assist in that growth?
I think there's a lot in the business community that is available for us as stage managers that's quite applicable. Any book on business management or leadership is going to be very insightful as to how you lead a group of people. And what we do as stage managers is we lead a group of people through a very trying process to create a product. That product is the play, the musical, the piece, whatever that work of art is. So just like whatever business, whatever company, you're making widgets, okay, we're making a scene, we're making a play. So how do we lead people from beginning to middle to end? Mm-hmm. I think that's quite applicable. And if you are in university, study psychology and sociology. Like those type of things will give you insights into how people react and what those insecurities are and how those come out and manifest. I once did a class, I went back to UC San Diego to actually guest teach for a semester there and with the grad students, which was a lot of fun as an undergrad coming back and teaching the grad students.
Sure.
And we did one course on actor psychology, and we talked about what things that annoy us about actors that are just part of their training. Mm-hmm. They're loud, they're selfish, those things, they're trained, I want. Stanislavski, I want. How many times do you have to hear, what do you want, until you really think that it's about me? Yeah. Totally understandable. Mm-hmm. And how much of it are potentially psychological issues? Is it depression, bipolar, all those things are real. Mm-hmm. And to be aware of those two things, those can be going on all the time, and to open your awareness of it. So understanding how the psychology of the brain works, I think would be amazing. Like if someone tells me, what should I study? I'm in school, but we don't have a stage management program. Study psychology.
Yeah.
Study psychology and then go volunteer at your community theater.
Exactly.
And you put those two things together, and you're like, aces.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you also agree that it's not only a cultivating and understanding of other people, but also yourself?
Oh, absolutely. We do a lot of, in my classes, know yourself. I introduce the topic by talking about stereotypes. And these are different stereotypes of stage managers I've worked with. Now, stereotyping we don't like to do. That has a negative connotation. But we all stereotype to a certain way in order to understand certain processes. So there's this method, there's this method, there's this. Okay, what's your method? How do you want to work? Because the way I relate to someone is not the same way you're going to relate to someone. And so I can't effectively communicate with you unless I understand what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling, what I'm going through. Mm-hmm. So self-knowledge, emotional intelligence, very, very important. Mm-hmm. So I think stage managers are allowed to have a personality. You're not a robot. You're allowed to be a person and a human and have a sense of humor and build relationships, and all that stuff is great. So how I approach something should not be the same way Beverly Jenkins does it, or not the same way Frank Lombardi would do it. We're all different people, and we want to get to the same place, and we have different sets of skills in order to do that.
When we talk about stage management and in that environment you've got those set of skills, do you see the role as, oftentimes you're taking a leadership role, but do you see stage management as a service in a show rather than a boss environment? Is that your approach?
Yeah, there's a concept in the business community of servant leadership. I think, I'm not sure if the book is titled that or something, but it's very much present in what we're doing. We are at service of the show, and our job is to take care of others. I've been diving into this business management idea for a few years now, and there's so many leadership quotes. You go on and on, these amazing people, whether it's Steve Jobs or other folks talking about how when you lead, you're actually, you're the one underneath everyone. If nobody knows what you're doing, but it's working, then you're doing a great job.
Exactly.
It's all sorts of, I think it was a Buddha quote or something like that I posted a few weeks ago, where it's like you lead from the back. There's a lot of that whole idea of being at service is what we do.
How do you think that your early work in lighting and other technical realms influenced your stage management career, and would you recommend stage managers who want to be stage managers cultivate their education in all of the other technical realms that are involved in it?
Oh, the more you know, the more you know. Being able to have a common language with your technicians is huge. So when they're talking about, the pan, the tilt, the delay time, honestly, you understand what that communication is. The same way with technical theater, with scenery and automation and flying. If I can talk about a 2-point harness or 1-point harness, I can talk about the tension and those things. Not that I have to know everything, but being able to have that common vocabulary is huge. On a purely practical level, having that lighting background has served me very well in my career, because I've developed a relationship with Mandy Patinkin's producer to go out and be his stage manager / lighting supervisor. Right. So having those dual skill sets, stage management and lighting are very copacetic in that way. Obviously we call all the light cues, so understanding lighting and the timing and the fluidity of that is very important. But a lot of places like dance companies and concerts, and even on tour with theater, you work intimately with the lighting directors, and so having that knowledge can be a real career booster.
It's funny because there's been a number of people that I've met in my career where there has been that connection with lighting and stage management, and there's been a swap. I started in lighting and in stage management, started stage management. It's not the stage manager / sound person.
It's really interesting. Yeah, you rarely see that.
Yeah.
It's funny because my actual degree at UCSD is in theater with an emphasis in lighting design, which I've never been hired professionally as a lighting designer, solo.
Yeah. There you go. So stage management is your thing.
Yeah.
Tell me about. It's probably a really difficult question to answer, especially because you've had a long career. Has there been a particular job and not necessarily one that you've really enjoyed as being your most favourite, but that has been the most significant shift in your development as a stage manager, and you've really evolved from doing that particular show? Is there a standout moment for you in your career?
Yes. I mean, my first Broadway show when I was doing Play On was a big eye-opener. I had gone from doing years at a regional theater and knowing how that process works, and now all of a sudden I went from that to now I'm in the big leagues. And the very first day of rehearsal, the PSM, who's still a dear friend of mine, gathered a team together and he said, "Your job is to make me look good." And I was like, what? Like, this is different. I was like, what happened to like, team, have fun, making theater, yay. I was like, all right, different. Got to approach this differently. And my relationship to that statement has changed dramatically from that first reaction. I totally get it now. And I'm like, yeah, because if the PSM looks good, we're all doing a really good job. Because the perception should be that that PSM is in control and knows everything of what's going on with the show all the time. And that's very difficult for one person to do.
Exactly.
So by all of us being able to take care of all the things that they don't necessarily need to know about at that moment until they need to know about, but making sure they're always informed and that everything is going on under the surface to make that PSM look good, that's exactly what you want to do. So I don't know if I would ever phrase it that way again, but I hear that statement differently and I'm like, yeah, absolutely. My job as an assistant is to make you look good, because if you look good, we are doing a great job together.
That's the mission.
Yeah, absolutely. As an assistant, make your PSM look good and everything else will fall into place.
How do you think the role of stage management has evolved? You had a session over the weekend about technology and stage management. How about for people like you who've been in the industry for a long time, what have you adapted in terms of your day-to-day applications that you didn't use 15, 20 years ago? And I say that in terms of, obviously we didn't have a cell phone of the magnitude that I'm videoing right now. So, of course, there's the normal efficiencies, but is there apps or applications or things that you use in your day-to-day life now that are invaluable?
I think the simplest version and the clearest is Google Forms for me. Okay. Like, I take care of so much stuff from the first day of rehearsal before we get to the first day of rehearsal by doing it that way. It's like all the things like, oh, fill out this emergency medical form first day, and then you're hunting everyone down for it. I'm like, no, I sent it to you 2 weeks ahead of time. You fill it online, and now it's already in my spreadsheet. So I've tried to make things efficient like that. Oh, you want to take our lunchtime vote? Yeah, okay, great. Here's the information on the lunchtime vote. Yeah, everyone just vote on it now before we can get to the first day of rehearsal. So confirm your equity name, all that stuff done and out of the way. So I think that's one singular, small, specific example. But the big overarching thing, if you look from 15, 20 years ago to now, it's the speed of communication. And that's email, that's texting, all of that, that's having the cell phone, that's the 24/7. You jump back 20 years ago and we had a fax machine and you faxed the report to 3 people after the rehearsal. That was it. Now you have to, after the show, but now that has to go out right away and it's emailed to a list of 30, 40 people. And and rapidly, information's flying back and forth. If you're at PSM, it's a 24/7 job now. You're never off the clock. Your phone is always on you, and people are always reaching out, communicating to you about something.
Do you think that's added stress?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was on a panel with Ira and a couple of the folks at Broadway Con at the beginning of the year, and Ira, one of his comments was, being a stage manager is a 24/7 job. And then he hasn't been an assistant. I've been an assistant often. I was like, well, being an assistant is more like, an 18/6. So it's a little bit easier. But that speed of communication, how everyone wants you to respond right away, it gets even harder to take that downtime and to manage work-life balance. And so that's the big challenge, is the speed and the time, and the technology has done that for us. That's why when we have a session like the technology we had at the symposium, what are the things that can make us more efficient? What are the things that can make things happen quicker so that we don't have to do so much of that and we can do the other things, whether it's family or whether it's other work responsibilities or whatever.
Because technology's moved so fast, we haven't actually mastered it, and used it to our best advantage. We're swamped in it right now. That's how I feel.
Oh, and one of the challenges is, where do you carve the time to ramp up on it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like that train is moving so fast. By the time you jump on the caboose, it's like I'm on the train. I'm on the train, but it's still miles down the road.
Yeah.
I did a business conference, where it was a few months ago or something. They were talking about technology is changing faster now than it ever has, and it's the slowest it's ever going to be. So it's only going to get more dramatic, faster, and that's a crazy thought.
That's mind blowing to think about that, isn't it?
Yeah.
So on that thread, I think the tendency for young stage managers is to go all in, right? And then there's some level of, I'm sure you have experienced, and I have also experienced, some level of burnout at some point where you go, oh, self-preservation is really important, and how do I do that? How do you, it's very easy, I now know you have a child, so that's a very easy delineation, you have to devote time to that. But prior to having a child, what did you do, or what was the practice or exercise or break that you did to separate your work from your life?
That's a really difficult question, because the simplest answer is I really didn't. Mm-hmm. You were all in. You missed the family events and the things, and you missed the time with your non-theater friends, and you loved what you're doing, and so you sacrificed. It's what I did for love. It's that song from a chorus line. Mm-hmm. It's like you do what you do because you love doing it. Mm-hmm. And to the credit of, I think, the current generation of millennials, is work-life balance is so much more important, and they start thinking about that earlier. Like that wasn't really an issue. You worked till 2 a.m. Okay, you worked, or we finished at midnight. Then you went out with your friends and you had a drink or something, and then you went home and you woke up at 10 and started the whole thing over again.
It wasn't terminology when we started. That work-life balance was not a word that people talked about, right?
No, you just worked, and that's what you did, and then you slept a little bit and did it again, and you loved it, and you really enjoyed it, and it was great. And then, in La Jolla, it was like, we were done, we go down to the beach and have a bonfire, and that was great. Then rehearsal the next day. So to their credit, that becomes something to think about sooner and earlier, and I think it's important to try to find what those strategies are to do it. And I don't have the answer. I've been asked before by young stage managers about that whole work-life balance question. It's like, the simple answer is, I don't have the answer. But what I do tell you, it's an important question to ask, and it's important to think about it and try to find the strategies to do that. Where I'm at right now with 2 kids is that I do the next most important thing, and then I do the next most important thing that has to get done. And it's not a great way to live, but it helps keep it going. And I think it's the 7 habits of highly effective people. There's that little grid, and it's the important, urgent grid. Mm-hmm. And there's a box down here, that's the not important, not urgent box, and that's when you're chilling, watching Netflix or something. It's like, not important, not urgent, but it's fine, you can be there sometimes. Then there's the urgent, important box, and that's like, oh my God, I need to pay my mortgage now, or I'm gonna get a bad credit rating or whatever. Then there's, up here, is the important, not urgent box, where you can take care of the things that are important, but it's not rushed. Like, okay, I planned this out, and then that's the next thing to do. That's great. That's where you want to try to be, but more often than not, I get pulled into the urgent, important box. Mm-hmm. And so I think I understand the problem very well, but the solutions to make it work have not quite discovered. And some things just wait, and some things don't get done to the level that you would like them to be done. There was a quote from someone at Facebook when I was doing an event with them. It said, "Done is better than perfect." And I really respect that now more than ever. It's like, getting a thing, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's done, great, move on. And that's one place that I think young stage managers could maybe learn a little bit from. It's like, your paperwork doesn't have to be perfect. You would love it if everything looked great. It has to communicate information effectively. Does it do that? Great. Next thing. And if you can make it look great and be perfect, that's awesome. That's great. So that's one place where it's like, Is it done? Great, do the next thing.
I can totally identify as a parent in the industry with you about doing the next urgent thing. That is also my life. But I also think that the people that, do you agree that the people that gravitate towards that job are that certain type of person? And what is that type of person? And how do you know if you're that type of person? Could you answer that question?
Yeah, there's something I think there's something in us that go into the theater, that there's something in us that is, for lack of a better word, cracked, broken, missing, and we gravitate towards theater or the arts because it fills us in a certain way. There's something about that familial environment that we get that we love being a part of and we need in our life. So as stage managers, part of our makeup is wanting to take care of everybody else. I take care of people and that fills me up. I figure out what you need and I solve that problem, it fills me up because we don't get applause, we don't get awards, but yet we keep doing it. An occasional attaboy or a pat on the back or thank you, but other than that, it's like, make coffee, get that done for the next break. All right, great. Nobody, they're like, thanks for making coffee. Rarely. I think there's something in our makeup that does that hungers for that. And that's just part of our makeup and who we are. And then in reverse, I think that makes it difficult for us in our personal lives. Because as a stage manager in rehearsal during the show, you don't say no. You might not say yes right away, but let me check, let me figure out, I'll look into it, I'm not sure. All right, but you don't say no. In your life, you should be able to say no. I don't want that, and that's okay. Or, no, that's not good enough. Okay. And those are important things to know and to be able to do, but we don't do that because it's all about the other. All about the other. And I think some of our, I don't want to say the word dysfunction, but part of our makeup is programmed to do that. And I think there's something great about that, and it feeds right into servant leadership, and it makes us really good at our jobs, and we can focus on other people and take care of that. But then it comes back to that work-life balance. How's the self-care?
Yeah. Yes, all the time, and you'll drown.
Yeah. And so it's one of the things important to find out, what do you do to relax? It's a perfect interview question that I ask stage managers. Like, what do you do to chill out? What do you do to relax? How do you handle the stress? For me, anytime I can be in a bath is great. Like, I grew up in hot water. My dad was in the spa business. Right. So if there's a jetted tub or even a non-jetted tub, there's hot water, I will literally stay in there for hours.
That's you too.
That's my thing.
We talked a little bit about learning how to deal with people and emotional intelligence, and being able to manage those situations can help with lowering your stress level in terms of feeling confident to manage those situations. But what about the pressure of calling a show or calling, some students asked me over the weekend, how do you deal with the pressure of flying people in the air and knowing that you could hurt them? How do you approach that kind of pressure? And even if, I don't care if it's flying people or calling opening night, the pressure can be, it's still the same. You're still feeling that responsibility when you call the show. How do you build that, and how do you deal with it personally? Right.
Well, first of all, you have to be prepared. Like, if you're not prepared, then it's a different kind of nervousness. There's nervous because who knows what could go wrong. Okay, that's great. That's good. Like, I even tell my actors, first act time an actor's going, it's like, oh, I'm so nervous. I'm like, that's good. Being nervous is good because it keeps you on your toes. So don't be scared of that. You can embrace that. Be nervous. Totally fine. But not being prepared is a whole other thing. It's like going into a big test. It's like, did you study? Okay. I'm still nervous, but you did your preparation. You do your homework. And then knowing you have a team. Like, the first time I go in to call a big show, it's like, all right, thanks guys. My first time, I'll watch your back, you watch mine. I even do that going into a corporate show. It's like, we're all together in this. And that's one of the reasons when you do a big show with lots of automation is it's not just you pushing one button and everything happens. As a human being, I can make a mistake. You as a human being, you can make a mistake, but the chance of both of us making the same mistake at the same time is very, very, very small. So that's why I communicate to an operator, and the operator pushes the button that then moves the person, the machinery, whatever. So I feel confident in my crew, and that together we will not have any of those issues. So for me, I try to over-prepare. There's that actually doing a thing where Peyton Manning was a guest speaker, and he was talking about as a football player, as a quarterback, he wasn't necessarily the best thrower or the best whatever, but he would always make sure he was the most prepared. And so when I was learning Wicked on the subway, my commute back and forth was, at the time, a little video iPod, headphones in, script open on the train, calling cues. Go. And this was me on the train, back and forth every single day. When I first started calling The Little Mermaid, there were 2 sequences that were quite difficult. And for the first month or so I was calling the show, before the show, every time I was calling, I'd be down at the call desk and I'd run through those couple sequences. Just so much weird fingerography and stuff. So it really is about that, what do you need to do? And sometimes, but I would sub at Lion King sometimes. And I was, I wouldn't be in a lot, but I would be in, I'd be gone for a couple months, and then I'd come in and do a show, and it was like, okay guys, it's 15, I'm gonna go rehearse myself. So I would go and I'd walk myself, literally, fake paging the curtain, walk up stage, fake shining the flashlight, walk down, fake turn on my headset, to build that muscle memory. Because if I can do muscle memory, I feel much more confident.
I think that's a really good point, and I think a lot of stage managers tend to feel like they should just walk in and ace a call like that. And to show that somebody, like, I had also a stage manager who was always very concerned about the straps act, and she would do the same thing. She would go up to the booth, watch it on video and call it before every show. I think for years actually. And then it became her routine and a ritual that, those rituals that you do to feel comfortable and confident in your space and that sort of thing.
Which is exactly what football teams do. It's like you script the first 15 plays of the game, and you practice those 15 plays, and you know exactly what you're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that rote learning is such a huge foundation for being confident under pressure, because you don't have to think, because you know that innately, and then you can then deal with the emotion that comes with the issue that is.
Your muscles are much smarter than your brain.
Exactly.
Yeah, because for me, I approach calling like choreography. Because I came up as a performer, I love dance, I love dancing. I'm like performing, but I'm dancing. So I just think there's a flip the switch and say the words and get your fingers up and go. And so it's like a song, and it's my own special script, and that's what I perform.
It's your own dance.
Yeah, and literally I've got notes before that I'm actually dancing too much while calling the show. I need to pull it down a bit, but that's me. So it's its own type of thing, and if you know this sequence is the 5, the 7, the 9, whatever, then boom, boom, boom. It's all becomes part of one thing, and you build those little building blocks, and then to put it all together is easy. Once you know, oh, this sequence is that, this sequence is that, this is that, this is that, and then it's like, oh, yeah, right, I know this thing. Oh, right, I know that part. So it's learning choreography, and then once your muscles know it, then you're ready to deal with the unknown. It's like, oh, that thing's not moving now. Okay, what do we have to do? Meanwhile, you're still calling lights go, and are they ready to do that? No, lights go. Okay, how much longer do you need? Lights go. Okay, the next thing is going to be about 2 minutes. We're moving. Lights go. Okay, this thing. Okay, stand by on the thing for that thing. If that happens, okay, right, lights go. And if you have that in your body, you're going to hear something like, oh, that's my thing. I'm supposed to get ready for that.
It's good. Going back to, and it's on the same vein, going back to technology and how fast it's progressing. There's a lot of talk globally in the industry about the progression of technology, and then the reduction of crews and things. And I say for things like black tracks for follow spots, where people wear little beacons on their shoulder. Those things are in action in the industry now. There's talk about more things being automated, and then having less people literally operating. I think one of the last people to go is going to be that show caller and stage manager, but as people go down in crew, do you think that the pressure and the responsibility of the stage managers is going to become greater, and how is that going to be managed in the industry? Because realistically, as they want to still continue to make money and they realise that they can invest in this piece of equipment and cut 2 crew members, but as you know, there's also no replacement for real eyes on a stage. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. That's a simple question. I think you can't replace the stage manager, because that's the human element, and someone has to manage the actors and the crew, the cast and the crew. And without a stage manager, that just doesn't happen. You can't automate that. You can't outsource that. Now that said, I see more and more often where we're trying to do big Broadway shows with the bare minimum number of stage managers, not necessarily the right amount of stage managers.
Right.
Like contractually, a musical has to have 3, a play has to have 2, but many times a musical will need 4 or 5. On Spider-Man, we had 7. Because you need at least one more person than it takes to run the show. Otherwise, when something does go awry, you don't have the ability to cover it. Or you don't have someone to maintain the show and to be the eyes out front. So if there's an illness, injury, you don't have the ability to handle that. So I do see people trying to pare that down to the smallest possible number. When it comes to replacement of technology, my concern is who's maintaining it. Like the technology works great. We don't need the people in the building to run the show, but we need someone in the building to maintain it because it will fail. And when it does, who's fixing it and how fast can it get fixed? If my follow spot stops working, maybe that's not the end of it. Okay, so we don't see that person as well. But if that light means that actor can't see and then can't perform safely, now I'm cutting things. That's like, okay, we're not doing that act then. Or we're not doing it this way, or we're doing it in work light, whatever solution. So that becomes my concern. Do we have the ability to fix it once it stops? And that's where I think, and you see that in a lot of industries, it's like, oh, we can automate this and lay 10 guys off. Okay, well now those 10 guys need to be trained to maintain this equipment because you're gonna need that. So that needs to happen.
I think, and I wonder if you agree, that the responsibility and the involvement and the discussion on those advances need to be involved with people who are running the show, perhaps the production stage
and they
managers.
so often are not.
Exactly. And so that as we master our technology, as it comes through and evolves so quickly, we then become the custodians of what's feasible and what's not feasible and do that. And that's, again, I think that's, like you said, that can be a challenge if you're not involved in the conversation. Can we or should we change that? And how could we do that in terms of making sure that, the big bosses at the top are like including the right people in that conversation? Or is that an impossible task?
I don't think any of it is impossible, but I don't think they're going to pay for the stage manager to come on earlier in the process. And we're the ones who get stuck running it. Even production managers, they're tasked with keeping the show on budget and get the show open, and then they disappear. And then they'll, if there's a maintenance issue or a question, they'll handle it, but they're not at the show every night. So that's the challenge, is trying to educate those people in the actual running of the show. Because unless the stage manager is coming on early enough, I'm not quite sure how you get that into the earlier conversation. Because I've seen this conversation happen around swings with actors coverage, where we don't have enough actors to keep the show the way the director and the choreographer envisioned it. We are cutting tracks all the time because we don't have enough coverage. And with equity and with the stage managers working together, over a course of time on that show, we were able to prove how important it was to have that extra contract in the building, and then the producers actually added the contract. So that's the performance version of the same thing that you're talking about. It's like, to have it covered properly, it takes X, and you're giving us X minus 1. So unfortunately, what I guess the path I'm going down is it becomes retroactive. You're like, first you have to prove and show these are the liabilities you have built into the process right now, and these are the consequences. And if you're happy dealing with that and include director, right? This is your show, but you're not going to get your show, 75% of the time. You're going to get your show bastardized by me, given the tools that we're given. And if everyone's okay with that, that's fine. Not a problem. I don't have to be emotionally attached to it in that way. It's like, all right, so instead of 4 dancing couples in the scene, we're going to have 3. That's the way it is. That's the way they've done it. And then the director, the choreographer, then they can make the fight that this is not the show that I envisioned. This is not what I signed up for. This is not what we did, and you need to fix it. Because for me, I can present all the options.
In New York, is that a common occurrence? And do you think across the board, maybe this is a contentious question, so you don't have to answer it. Generally, I'm not talking in any specific show, are we showing people who are general public citizens. There are people for me who create culture and people who consume culture. Are we giving them the best we can?
I think we are.
Yeah.
I think so. Yes, I think we're all skilled enough to give them the show that was envisioned and presented on opening night, and then to give a very close to that semblance of it when it isn't. Mm-hmm. My phrase is always, our job as stage managers to get the best show possible on stage every night. And much of those little slice and dice shows that we do, the audience doesn't recognize it. Creatives might. But sometimes there's a thing, it's like, oh yeah, there's a hole. That does happen occasionally. And I don't know if we're in our business sharing that enough to know what's happening across the board. But I know on the shows that I've done, when we do have those cut shows, I won't say it's never, but it's rare that it's painfully obvious, because we work really hard to make that happen. But what that happens then is the bar gets moved and you come up to the bar. Then the bar gets moved again and you come up to the bar. When you keep overachieving, you keep being asked to overachieve.
Exactly. And
that's one of the challenges of being good at our jobs. You see that, you hear that talked about in lots of other businesses where it's like, do more with less. Okay, now do more with less. You never hear, okay, do more with more. It's like, or do less with more.
Exactly.
You never hear that. It's like, interesting. So that's always the way. So I don't know at what point is the breaking point.
Yeah.
But it would be a really interesting study to share that across our industry and be like, how often are you doing cut shows? How often are you cutting actor tracks or pieces of scenery or making those adjustments?
Do you think, I kind of see the unions associated with this region as kind of custodians of defending certain conditions and things like that for the shows and the people that work on the shows. Do you think that plays a part in setting that standard and maintaining the level that you're talking about? And I ask this question because in the area that I work in Asia, there is none. And therefore, because people are not protected and because people are not under union rights or pay or things like that, you've got all kinds of standards of people working on shows and not necessarily making quality entertainment. And the way I view from the outside looking into New York is that part of the reason that you're able to maintain a level is because you've got to work hard to get an equity card, you've got to work hard to get into shows, you've got to, once you're in, the certain unions, you're protected, you're taken care of certain things, so you can serve the show and whatever job you're doing, whether it be performance or backstage, well, because you've got those conditions that guarantee you not worrying about how you're gonna, get your health insurance bill, or etc., etc. Do you think that aids in the standard of New York shows?
Oh, I think the quality of the stagehands is great. I mean, Local One, for whatever negative connotations may exist with that, they are great stagehands, and I trust them implicitly. They will make your show happen if they feel taken care of, and that's important, and that's a two-way street. That's what the producers with stage management, we work together, we respect them very much, and they respect us. So the way that they present themselves and work together to, anytime a show has ever stopped, you just see all the crew just go, what do we do to fix this? And all these like hands and things are flying around, like, okay, great, it's ready, and everybody jumps in and makes it work.
Yeah.
There's a great skill there. And with Equity, I'm very, very pleased with how Equity has worked tirelessly to maintain our standards and take care of actors and stage managers. And that hasn't always felt like the case. But I do feel that they're doing a really good job making us feel taken care of and doing what needs to be done, because that's the push me pull you. Broadway is commercial theater. The commercial comes first. It has to make money, and that I think the capitalist drive of that helps us in many ways, because we have to be more efficient. We have to be able to find more creative solutions to make things happen given that environment. And it's not like we can all sit back and be like, all right, yeah, we got 3 months to figure this thing out. Let's do this today. No, that didn't work. Let's figure that out tomorrow. It's like, no, we're working. It's a drive. And it's like, let's go. Let's figure it out. Let's make this work. And so that kind of passion, and I think that's kind of a very American way of approaching it. We're not the kind of culture that takes off the month of August, or that everyone is guaranteed 2 weeks vacation of the year. It's like, you gotta work. And we're all very happy to work on it. We love it. We love this business. We love making theater. So everyone jumps in, and it's exciting that way.
And for all the people that are involved, there's hundreds waiting in line to be a part of that. And I think that also feeds a certain standard, even though, obviously it has its competition and people have to either make it or they don't make it in the industry. But when you're scrambling for people in other parts of the world to put a show together, you're not necessarily getting that. And so I see that as a huge benefit of this, putting on shows in this area. You're fed with people who have a huge passion, a huge desire, capability, protected, ready to work, protected by the unions, protected by equity, ready to serve the shows, and therefore you're getting the end result there is a good standard of what you're seeing on a Broadway show, which can change when you're working in other parts of the world. Does those, excuse my ignorance, with equity and stuff, do all those things apply when you're on tour as well? There's a sort of touring conditions and conditions for when you're here, or do they sort of, are they standardized?
With that exactly, it's pretty standard. The production contract that covers Broadway and first national tours is quite similar. Obviously, we have touring rules and travel rules in addition. But there are other tiers of contract for national tours. There's the CETA contract, which has its own pay structure and salaries and things like that. But the general work rules are roughly the same. Yeah.
It seems for somebody who's not in America that the battle to get to Broadway is insurmountable. Because first they've got the permission to work in the country itself, and then they've got to get enough work to be recognised, and then they've got to get their equity card.
I think the first thing is the bigger stumbling block. The idea of visas and immigration and those type of laws, I feel it's a bigger stumbling block to achieve, because that's all government regulations. In essence, it's relatively easy in a certain perspective to get that job on Broadway, because all you need to do is to get the right person to say, I want you. It doesn't matter if you're a member of the union. Okay, here's your union card. Right. There's no test to take. It's like, we want you to do this job. Okay, now I'm a union stage manager. However, that was an oversimplification. In order to get that right person to offer you the job, that involves all the years of hard work and networking and contacts and building a reputation, and the skill set to be in that position to make that happen. There's another sports analogy. People say it's about when opportunity meets not experience, and opportunity meets
preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
So when talent, that's the word I'm looking for. When talent meets opportunity, then that's the spark. You've got it. When the star running back goes down with an ankle injury, and the backup is sitting there, it has more talent than this guy, but didn't have the opportunity. You go in there, boom, now you're a superstar.
Yeah. So not what you would say to international people wanting to work in this area is not, the work's got to be there to get you in the door, but the biggest hurdle is being able to work into the country. Don't be afraid of, once you get here, grinding the grind.
If you are good, you will work.
Yeah.
There is work. It takes, getting the door open is the hardest part. That is hard. I think of the Broadway community especially, I think of it like a giant Ferris wheel. And it goes around and around and around, and all those little chairs are full. There's not really room on it. But somebody gets off, somebody gets back on, the wheel goes around, somebody's off and somebody's on. It happens. Well,
I don't know if America particularly likes stage managers, but I have had 3 stage managers win the green card lottery.
Wow.
What are the odds? And I think it's pretty much the only 3 stage managers that applied for the lottery. So,
wow.
And I don't know if that stage manager, tick, come to the country. So you just don't know your luck, do you? So
that's interesting.
A few more questions, because I don't want to give you more than an hour, and I know you have to go. Did you have a mentor, or do you have a mentor today? And what does that person provide by the way of advice or support or mentorship that you take from that person?
I don't think I have one mentor, so to speak. At different parts of my lives, I had people who have mentored me and taught me a lot. When I first started out, Karen Carpenter was a huge influence on my career. I worked with her in La Jolla, and then she hired me as the second assistant on the Les Mis tour, and I spent 2 years, 6 months, and a week on that with that company. Learned a lot, which is amazing. Robert Calfin, my first Broadway stage manager, has been a big mentor of me, especially transitioning into doing more corporate event work, because he did that many years ago, and like, so what about and how about? And then kind of a newer colleague in that area, Cheryl, she has also helped me a lot with a lot of questions as I've been finding my way in the event industry. So in my career, it's never been like one person kind of like connect with and taking me through the career. Mm-hmm. It's been like different people at different times in my life. And my career has really been that way. Some people hook in with a director or a PSM and they work together, and I have rarely worked with the same team. Mm-hmm. It's really been like, oh, this is happening here and that's happening here, and bouncing back and forth. I've been an assistant, I've been a PSM, I'm doing dance, I'm doing theater, I'm on tour, I'm doing it. So it's been an interesting journey for me, kind of scattershot in a way, where the timing just works out. Where okay, now I'm in this. It's great, awesome. Now I'm in that. Okay, great, awesome.
With there's a lot of female stage managers and there's a lot of male stage managers. Is there discussion issues or situations where gender equality or diversity is an issue in Broadway?
Yeah. I think there are,
particularly with stage management.
Yeah, there are an amazing number of great women stage managers. I feel honored to have worked with many of them. But the upper echelon seems still filled with men across the board. I don't necessarily have statistics behind it, but just anecdotally, you look at who has those big production supervisor jobs, and 9 times out of 10, that's a man in that chair.
Interesting.
Yeah, and especially as a man, I've been opening my eyes more and more to that and going, yeah, there is something there. I have a dear friend of mine who's an amazing stage manager, and she's had some issues as she's been interviewing for jobs and going, okay, didn't get that one, didn't get that one, oh, who did? Oh, that's interesting. Okay. And I don't think that there is a conscious reason for that. I think it's kind of the same, comes from the root of the same issues we have with diversity, is that we want to work with people that we have pre-established relationships with, and we want to work with people that we're very comfortable with, and so we default to the same people. Mm-hmm. And because you go back and everything was much more male-centric, so we're still fighting that, getting out of those relationships that have already existed and being able to establish new ones.
Do you think awareness is a start, right?
Yeah.
But is there anything that the people within the industry and people coming into the industry could do to actively change that?
Oh, there was a lot of conversation about that. I'm on the board of the Stage Managers Association, and working on all sorts of various programming and working with people to try to find ways to open that up, mm-hmm. to start opening, like, we need to talk more about POC. We need to open our eyes to what's out there and not just keep staying in our circles. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of us are really aware of that and trying to actively talk about it and actively figure out what things we can actually do mm-hmm. to open up.
Because there is one thing about awareness, but then there's another thing. It's like, well, now what do we do about it? You know what I mean? And how do we change that culture? And I think that, it's something that I've been thinking quite a lot about in terms of how we even behave in a rehearsal room, and how we even, interact with people, and what kind of jokes get told. All of those things that just are so ingrained, and I think we're of a generation that there were so many biases that we were raised with, that you now, coming back to knowing yourself as a stage manager, that you're now looking at yourself, you're like, oh, I'm that white girl who thinks that.
Those built in those unconscious biases, and being aware of it, like we talked about earlier, with knowing yourself and learning what those things are, so then you can start making conscious choices about them. Mm-hmm. There's It's like in the NFL, there's that Rooney Rule, where you have to, any head coaching openings, you have to interview at least so many, people of color for the job. And I don't think it's about us establishing a rule about that. But I do think it is about us, when we do have available positions, to make sure we do include those people in the process, and not just, oh, here's the same 6 people I've been working with over the last, let's see which one's available. Well, no, you need to force yourself to go, I want to talk to some stage managers of color. I want to talk to people who are different than me, so I can open up the pool. And not that you necessarily have to hire those people, but as they come into the world, now they're in the community, and now it's just all mixing up. And I see that in my classes at SUNY Purchase. I see much more diverse classes coming in, both in gender, orientation, ethnicity, and I love it. I'm like, that's kind of one practical way where it starts. Is there's so many stage management programs, and as we can make those more diverse, the stage managers coming into the professional world will be more diverse. And although that's not an immediate solution, that is that long-term way of like, plant the seeds and they will grow.
One more question. You've stage managed some of the biggest shows in the world on Broadway, and you've been all over the world, and you run the Broadway Stage Management Symposium. Where are you going? What are you going to do? What's going to be your 10-year plan? Do you have somewhere you want to be? Are you enjoying life now? Are you paying the bills for the kids? Is there another project you want to land before you retire? Tell me about.
What I'd really love, the overarching, the 3,000-foot view is I want to make the world better through better stage management. Like, that's the big goal. I think by helping stage managers understand their power as managers and their humanity, and that their ability to empathize and how they lead, how that impacts both their company and then the audiences and therefore the world, I think is huge. And that is my big overall mission, whether it's the teaching, whether it's the symposium, whether it's just chatting with the stage manager, whether it's writing an article. That's where I think that my life will have some huge meaning. I don't need to travel. There are some places I haven't been that I'd love to, but I've been in a lot of great places, and that's awesome. I've been on Broadway. I love it. It's great. One thing I haven't done is PSM to Broadway show from rehearsal through production process. I'd love to do that eventually. But am I paying the bills? No. So I would like to be able to do that too. And to try to find some work-life balance. Like where I am right now, it's like I achieved my goal. Like when I was a kid, it was I wanted to be on Broadway. And I found the role that was right for me, and I did that, and that is awesome. And I'm thrilled. The shows that I've done, the people I've met, it's been a great, wonderful adventure. But the idea now with the symposium, with the teaching, to be able to actually take some of that experience, process it, and through kind of the lens of the corporate event work that I've done and understanding those business and management leadership theories, to impart those skills to young stage managers so they realize they're not just doing a show. It's not just making paperwork and calling cues. There is a much higher mission and a higher calling that you're doing, and if you can approach your job that way, all those other things will fall into place. Remember the big picture, the really important things. That to me would be huge, and to reframe that idea, even down to we did the panel yesterday about stopping a show. Just reframing that. The show must not go on. It's okay. Reframe it. Yeah, try to figure out, make it work, but then when you have to stop, you stop, because it's about the people first. The audience is going to be okay, and if there's some producer freaking out because his show stopped, in 2 minutes it's going to restart, and then you can explain to him that was a much better call than having a lawsuit, because that will bankrupt him, as opposed to this, he just feels like his pride is injured. So reframing those things to me would be amazing, and I've been so thrilled that so many of my colleagues are kind of on board with that, whether they consciously or unconsciously know it. As I've had private discussions with them and then the panel discussions, it's like we're all in that same place where we know that that 90% of our job is communication, and it's management and leadership, and it's not paperwork and queue calling. That's this much of the job. The big things, calling that flying queue of flying 15 people in the air is really important. That's their safety. But them trusting you before they get into the harness and go up, that's the important part.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And how you handle it when something does go wrong, and a winch jumps or a queue is early or late.
And how you go speak to them when it has gone wrong after the show.
Yeah, like those are the skills that will affect their life. Because if that problem happens and you go to talk, or you don't go to talk to them afterwards, and then they sit and they fester and they're angry, that affects their life in a huge way. Now they're walking, they're angry, they're upset about coming to work, they don't want to be there, they don't trust you. And then when you have to talk to them something, then they're blowing up in your face, and then you're feeling bad. It's like all this agita and bad feelings over because it wasn't managed effectively.
Mm.
That's a big thing.
Yeah. Such a wonderful mission. Very wonderful mission, an admirable mission. And I'm right there with you. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
It's great.